Yes, my name is Richard Kim. Is that all right?
That's fine. Okay, I'm going to make a brief synopsis kind of what we did. Sensei Richard Kim, when were you born?
I was born November 17, 1919, in Hilo, Hawaii.
And when were you first exposed to the martial arts?
1926. They really exposed to martial arts in 1926. I started off in judo, about a year prior to that. And in 1926, I had a full exposure to the martial arts because I met Yabo Kenso. Yabo Kenso probably, in the opinion of many historians, karate people, probably was the most powerful karate man that ever lived, physically powerful. He was called a sergeant. And he came to Hawaii and gave a big demonstration with his student Arakake. He stayed approximately about a year and a half. And he made a big impact upon the Okinawan community. The Okinawan community was slightly separated from what you would call the Japanese community, Japanese per se. The Japanese call themselves Naichi. And Okinawans was considered outlanders, outside. And then, of course, because of his coming to Hawaii, they had people like Chokimotobu and Miyagi Chojo and some other lesser figures come to Hawaii and try to spread the Okinawan art because Hawaii had a lot of Okinawan immigrants. The Okinawa is a very poor, was considered a poor prefecture of Japan. So South America, Hawaii was populated from Japan of mostly Okinawans, just to get away from the poverty. And the Okinawans did not have a long cultural history as the mainland Japanese, so the idea that these great masters came to Hawaii was a big thing for the Okinawans. That's when I was first exposed.
How old were you at that time?
Well, I started judo at the age of 6, and in 1926 I was 7 years old. And with my training, it continued ever since, until now, until today.
I'm sorry if I interrupt your question. Would you talk about your family, why they brought you into the martial arts?
Yes, my father was half Japanese and half Korean because my name is a Korean name. His father and his grandfather, they came from a military family. When you hear the name Kim, it is typically Korean, but there's 5 types of Kim. And one is the type of Kim that my father was, from his Korean side, were the military Kim. They were very famous. In fact, my grandfather had 30,000 troops. My father's father, my grandfather, married a Japanese woman. So my father was raised in Nagasaki because there was a lot of tension between the Koreans and the Japanese because of China. Korea owed allegiance to China through the Queen of Korea, and the King of Korea was very favorable towards the Japanese. If you study the Japanese history, and that was prior to when Japan defeated Russia in the Russian-Japanese War in 1910 in Treaty of Portsmouth, Korea was annexed to the Japanese Empire. But prior to that, Korea paid a suzerain tribute, to China. The culture came from China, and it was a long history of a country divided. The history of Korea is not a happy history. So my father, being raised in Nagasaki as half Korean and half Japanese, he managed to come to Hawaii. It was prior to the Russian-Japanese War. I think it was 1899 or something like that. Between the time that China lost the war, China went to war with Japan in 1895, 1899. And he married my mother, who was also half Japanese, half Korean. And my mother's family is from Yokohama, and supposed to come from a samurai family, whatever. So since Korea was part of the Japanese Empire, they decided, and of course my father was raised in Nagasaki, that I should follow the military tradition of Japan. And that's how they insisted that I learn the best that Japan could offer, especially my father. But he was very quiet, and it was my mother who did all the pushing, but it was actually my father, because both the Korean and Japanese ancient custom, being a patriarchal society, the mother or the sisters never eat on the same table. You know, the men folk eat first, and they eat afterwards, and that was on the surface. But in many households, the mother was the control the house, and outside, the male control. Mm-hmm.
What was training like for you? You know, you were 6, 7, 8 years old. How does your family affect your training?
Well, it was very rigorous, and Hawaii was a territory of the United States. And, you know, you play baseball and basketball, and you play swimming and all that. And the training took me away from my friends. So, in a way, I was raised almost without friends per se. Not a loner, you know. I'm a very gregarious person. But the training was very severe. Like, for example, I remember one person, I'll mention him again, Koji Ariyoshi. He was the one person I could not, in childhood fighting, you know, he always picked me up. He beat me up 7 times. And when you, in our household, anyway, when you come home and you're bleeding or black eye from fighting, you want to know who won the fight. If you lost the fight, you couldn't eat. So, on the last fight I had with Koji Ariyoshi, I beat him up because my sensei, Arakaki sensei, says, it's a long story, he says, well, what you do is, he's bigger and stronger, so you must psych him out, you must attack him. So I went to Koji's house, and I knocked on the door. The mother came out, said, what do you want? I said, I want to speak to his son, Koji. And when he came to the door, I attacked him right in his own house. And it surprised him, so I won the fight. And of course, we became good friends. But that was a type of training. The severity of the training, the mores and folk ways was slightly different. It was almost disgraceful. More so, I believe, among the Koreans, although the Koreans never get credit for it, more so the idea of the son losing a fight. The Japanese, it did not matter too much to them because the long samurai tradition, the fact that the son would participate in a sporting event, enter a tournament, losing or winning was not important. You know, the participation was important. The important thing about the Japanese, on the Japanese side, was you could not cry. To cry, even as a child, was considered disgraceful. So the idea of crying or going into tears was burned out from me when I was a child. In fact, when my mother died, she died several years back, I couldn't cry. It was just burned out of you. With the Koreans, they emote very much. They could cry, but they would not want you to lose in physical combat. But crying was all right, but not with the Japanese. The Japanese was very stoic. On the surface, you know, in Japanese senseis, they're very emotional people. The Japanese actually are very emotional and very impatient people. But the male could not exhibit any sign of weakness, and the most obvious sign for a child was to cry. We were not permitted to cry. I remember that very much. Mm-hmm.
Because of the time, I'm not going to go into it. Maybe we could ask some questions about the philosophy of karate into your whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how the martial arts have affected your life?
Well, the martial arts taught me, you will come across the phrase hanatsu kurai, but to put it in English language, the basic philosophy of the martial arts is that you must realize that all phenomena are impermanent. Buddha said that shogyo mujo. If you realize that all phenomena are impermanent, including your physical life, then you ought to develop the realization, or whatever we call kensho or satori, that everything that you have does not belong to you. there is a high authority, what we call an incredible partnership. We'll come to the material things, for example, to explain it, make you a description. If you own a house outright, you have no mortgage to pay, the house doesn't really belong to you, because if you do not pay taxes, it can be taken away. It can be taken away by eminent domain. So there is a high authority. You must conform to a certain structure. You must pay taxes. The clothes that you have, for example, will never be with you forever, because eventually the material wear off, get worn off, you discard, worn out clothing, and you buy new clothes. Likewise, your life. A person holds most dear to him, if he had a choice of giving up your life or $10 million, for example, you would give up the $10 million to preserve your life, because if you give up your life, you're finished in this physical phenomenal world. So the martial artist, realizing that, and that life is fleeting, and that life does not belong to him, he tries to live not in a nihilistic sense, live life as it is right now. He cannot have regret. In other words, to put it the way some people in English language have put it, I know yesterday, I enjoyed tomorrow, I'm looking forward. I know yesterday, I'm enjoying today, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And not in a nihilistic sense, but with full appreciation. And that is the basic philosophy of the martial arts, to bring the world within outside. And as I said yesterday, Diogenes, the Greek philosopher, they asked him what was the most difficult thing for a human being, and he put it in essence, to know thyself. And of course, Plato followed it up afterwards. And they asked him what was the easiest thing for a human to do. He said, to give somebody advice. And the martial artist, he knows that full well. That's a basic philosophy. You become an artist of life. And as an artist, knows how to use his tools, the equipment he works with, and the medium that he works in. For example, a painter works on a canvas with the brush and the oils, watercolor, whatever he does. An artist of life, he maximizes the potential of his physical equipment, which is his human body, in a holistic sense, in conjunction with his mind, and he controls and works in a medium that he is an artist of life in, which is the universe. So you can say that he's a master of his fate and captain of his soul. That is the basic philosophy of the martial arts. The very simplicity is the thing that mankind has never been able to achieve for very select few. The ones that we are aware of are the holy man. Jesus, the Christians claim, is a son of God, and we can go on that basis. Moses was a human being. In fact, he's the only human being that saw God in the flesh and talked to him. And you have Buddha, 300 BC before Christ. You have Mohammed. And Mohammed was an ignorant, Arab. Couldn't even read or write, but according to the Mohammedans, he saw the vision, and the angel Gabriel told him to proclaim, had it done 3 times. He was so frightened of Gabriel, Christian angel, archangel, that he proclaimed the Mohammedan religion. That is the whole basic idea. In fact, a martial artist has a perspective that is based on what we call reality. Because even myself, the world that I see is based on illusion because of the filtering system. Filtering system is 3 basic filters: neurological function, the limit of your physical makeup; sociological function, the limit of the language you speak; and individual differences, the limit of your experiential background. In fact, I'll tell you something. In the summer camp in San Diego, one of the students of a JK instructor, I forgot his name, came up and said, "Sensei, my instructor said you could solve the problem for me." It's a woman. She is on doctoral program, I believe, or was ready to pick up a master's degree. And I asked her what the problem was. She says, because of my religion, I cannot bow to the picture of Funakoshi Gichin in the dojo. So I said, Eureka. I'm 60 years of age. I have a doctorate in philosophy, and I have met now a new religion that you cannot show deference, to the master of the art and ask you what the religion. I says, Leon, pick up a pencil and paper and write down this religion. I ran through my mind the 5 big religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Mohammedanism, Judaism, and Zoroaster, the Zoroaster religion they have in Persia. And I said, what is your religion? She said, Christianity. It stunned me, So I said, do you believe in the angel Gabriel? And this is the answer I received from her. She said, well, he's an archangel, but the Christians don't like him too much because he created the Mohammedan religion. I said, oh, yeah, okay. I said, Gabriel was the one who told Moses to go up to the mountain and pick up the 10 Commandments? She said, yes. I said, okay. Do you know Gabriel is the one who told Mary she was going to have immaculate conception, give birth to Jesus? She said, yes. I said, do you know Gabriel is the one who saved Daniel from the lion's den? Do you know Gabriel is the one, of course, he went to Muhammad. I said, who is Gabriel? She said, the messenger of God. As soon as she said that, she said, I will bow to Funakoshi Gichin. This is a perspective.
How does karate, how does the martial arts allow one to be an artist of life? What's that process?
The process is you must first maximize your physical potential, because regardless of the legacy that René Descartes left behind for modern medical science, there is no complete separation of the mind and body. So you must maximize the tool that you work as an artist of life, your own body. To maximize the potential of your body, you must exhaust through very rigorous, repetitive training that would become so boring that it would practically blow your mind. Intellectually, you scream, you want to learn something different. Because in life, we do well what we like. Something that you don't like, if it's a chore, probably go to a university and take up whatever particular subject you take. If you don't like it, you're not going to do too well. You do well in the subjects that you like. So, to exhaust the physical limit of your body, per se, without the mind entering the picture, the training must be rigorous and repetitive, where it comes to the point where your mind wants to scream and yell for something different, because the body will not get tired unless the mind gets tired, unless you happen to be sick, physical ailment. Then, when you realize that the potential of the body depends upon the limit of the mind, that the mind imposes upon the body, then you go into the world within, into the mind. And that's a process. There's no other process in the martial arts. Now, in some other disciplines or some other profession, you can achieve enlightenment. Usually in religion. The reason why it's in religion, since you're giving up your life for your God, you are willing to die for your faith. You must come to that point. And you must come to an adverse situation or problem where you will be glad to give up your life, and then the realization will hit. Now, outside of religion, I cannot think of any other discipline in life where it would bring you to that stage except with the martial arts, because the martial arts brings you to the problem of facing death, because that is the ultimate adversary. But the adversary of facing death is yourself, because death is nothing. It's just you flip from life to death. You're dying, and birth and rebirth every day. Your cells die, be born. Your cells die and be born. You see, the only probably it would take a long academic discussion. Probably the only thing immortal about you would be your soul, but your physical components of your body eventually will die. It's dying every day, some part of your body from the time that you was born, medically speaking. Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about the importance of weapon training?
Yes. Since you asked me that, the importance of weapons training is that it shortens. It's like going to a university where you receive a degree, baccalaureate or master's, or doctorate, it is structured for you. A person doesn't have to go to an educational institution to be able to get the same knowledge. He can do it himself. But if it's not structured, it'll take him 2 or 3 or even 10 times the amount of time you have to put into a school, because the school, the people who have already arrived will, shape the courses for you. For example, I'll tell you an incident which would make sense to the Christian world. Jesus gave up his life for mankind, so that he can save mankind and show you the way, because man is born in original sin according to Christian concept. It would be that you can achieve salvation yourself. But if you were to walk from San Francisco to New York, it would take you 3 months to walk. With Jesus giving up his life, it would be as if he put you on a jet and you get there 4 hours earlier. So with the weapons training, since it brings into much quicker and sharper focus the fragility of the human body and the fragility of life that you dearly cherish and don't want to give up, you want to hang on forever, seeking for eternal life. The weapons training brings into sharp focus. If you do not have weapons training, there is a very big danger of going into the sporting arena completely. And in the sporting arena, all the rules and regulations is geared to where you preserve your fragile life with the idea of just winning. There's nothing wrong in that. In sporting event, there's nothing wrong in that. But with weapons training, you do not have weight divisions. You can be a heavyweight, and a person can be a woman, physically much weaker. But if she has a saber in her hand, for example, and she cuts first, and she'll win the fight, you see, because there is no second place winner in weapons combat. And that philosophy, on a physical level, is a philosophy of, especially in karate. That's the reason why in karate we do not have weight division. Size does not matter, because there is no contact. If it's a contact sport, you need weight division. And weapons training brings into sharp focus the essence of the martial arts on a physical level. On a physical level. Then the philosophical level is up to the particular institution, type of art that you're studying, your sensei, and whatever, Mm-hmm.
Who were some of the masters that you trained with?
Oh, I trained under practically every one that was worth training under, but the ones who had a direct influence in my life, of course, were Yabu Kenso, Arakaki, not Arakaki Ankichi, but Arakaki, Yabu's student, Yoshida Kotaro, Chen Chen Wan, Tai Chi master, Su Chao Lai, Chinese magician, you'd call him a Kung Fu master, and Ono Kumao, 94 years old, he's the advisor for the Butokukai. He's 94 years of age, and he's the title head of the Butokukai. Although the head of the Butokukai right now is the Prince Higashi Fushimi of Japan. He's the Empress's youngest brother. He's a priest. And various other small individuals, but the ones who made a big impact is Yabu and Chen, Su, Yoshida Sensei, Yoshida Kotaro, that I can think of right now. Or I trained with people like Sawai. We had not trained under him when I met Sawai on an equal basis, and like with Mr. Nishamo, we trained together and cooperate. I've met the best. I've met the best. The best in Shotokan at one time, when the war ended, was a man by the name of Minatoya Sensei. He's Nishiyama's senior, but he's not JKA person right now. He's Chuo Daigaku. They all train with me. I've met them all, the great and the near great. Mm.
So, toward extraordinary people.
Okay. Point where the illusion was broken.
it sounds like you've trained under, that you've met some extraordinary people. Who, can you describe some of these people you've met in your 55 years of martial arts training and traveling throughout the Orient?
Well, like Tsu, Chao Lai, one of the instances I can give you that if he was to move his hand and he push it forward about 6 inches, and you have a big ball that he could push that by whatever energy developed, some sort of kinetic energy. And Chen, the Tai Chi master, that like for example, one day he was walking down towards the Garden Bridge in Shanghai. This is during the war years, and I didn't see that myself, but I was told by very reliable sources, was some people in the Japanese military, and they were astounded. This old person is walking down, and there was an air raid came, and a big rush of humanity, the masses, the teeming millions in China, and one person was running towards him, and he's walking, didn't even notice the person behind him, and when the person came up, and you would think he'd run into the person's body, and it was as if there was an invisible wall, whether it was imagination or illusion of the eyesight. He had it was as if he had a spiritual wall. You could not, a key that just exuded from him when there was danger, and it bounced off. For Sawai Sensei had that himself. I never contested the key that they would exude, but I know this in Chinatown, in San Francisco, there's an old man by the name of Kwok, and one of my students years back took a Coca-Cola bottle, we just drank a bottle of Coke, took him, and he shot at the bottle from a distance. Now, whether that's martial arts or not, he developed that from the martial arts. And, well, one of the unusual persons that I have met, for a young man who's 10 years younger than I am, of course he does not do these so-called miraculous magic feats, but the man his dedication to the martial arts is beyond the comprehension of most Western people, is Mr. Nishiyama. That's the reason why I'm doing everything on my behalf with my organization to help him to achieve his gains. He's a very unusual person. His technical ability is amazing, because I take pride in my ability too. We all have pride, and I have a very extensive background in the academic world, and of course in the martial arts world. He cannot compare in the number of years and exposure I've had to the martial arts, but his ability on the exoteric level, on technical level, is second to none. Much better than anybody in the JKA. I'd say equal to mine, maybe better.
You've had some turning points in your life, and you've talked about Kenso, that breaking of illusion that occurs in the process, maybe in the process of training or in the process of a person's life. When did that occur for you, if it did?
Yes, it did for me many times, because you have a lot of small kenshos, but I had never faced a physical death, myself. But it happened in World War II in Nanking, China. I had Chinese clothes on, and I can pass for, depending upon the clothing I'm wearing, and if I'm speaking the language, I can pass for Chinese very easily because of my height. Northern Chinese. And I was Nanking, and it was in the winter, was snowing, and I was going to my temporary place where I was staying, in an apartment I was staying. We kept the place for enough, a number of months or whatever, the family members, part of my family. And as I was turning, I didn't realize I've been away for 2 weeks. And the Japanese had built up a pillbox because there's a lot of terrorism and infiltration, behind Japanese lines. And I tripped over an object, and I see there was a foot of a Japanese sentry just standing there. And he spoke to somebody in a pillbox and put a bayonet on my throat. And he said, I wonder what this Chinese person is doing outside. Maybe he's a terrorist or an infiltrator. an infiltrator. Military terminology is infiltrator, not terrorist. I take it back, infiltrator. And I think I killed him. I've never killed anybody who had no means to defend themselves, because he killed somebody probably in warfare at a distance, very impersonal, maybe shoot him with a bullet or something like that. Then I spoke in Japanese to him, and he was surprised. But at that time, during the time that he's talking to a person in a pillbox, you hear the expression, some people before they die, in a few seconds, their whole life flashes in front of them. And Mr. Leong, my student, he had that experience. He was in an automobile accident, a very severe accident. And when he got rammed in an automobile, he thought he was going to die. His whole life flashed to him because it's what we call time distortion, is the terminology we use in hypnotism. So in that period of time, that time expansion, and in that period of time, in the time expansion, I suddenly realized all my training was for this purpose. I suddenly found myself, I was not afraid to die. It meant nothing, my life was fleeting. Then I decided that to the best of my ability, I would devote my life to spreading the quintessence of the martial arts, mainly the philosophy. Because when you learn the martial arts on a physical level, any good sensei, or anybody who's a fourth dan in Japan anyway, to use a criteria, actually doesn't matter, even a person doesn't have dan. Before the World War II, there was no such thing as dans per se. You're just three titles. You were a trainee, an instructor, and a master. The Renshi, Kyoshi, and Hanshi. The dans came from judo, and it I cannot pronounce the word. Yeah, proliferated after World War II because of the people want to know how they stand by physical evidence. But prior to World War II, even on the dan system, it was you were white belt or black belt, and in between they gave you brown to let you know how you were coming. So that was a very big kensho. I have never, probably when I was young, I was never afraid to die, but the reality never hit me until I actually faced the situation. That was a very big one for me. In that sense, in the spiritual, intellectual sense, through meditation. I'm not a Zen monk. I do not follow the tenets of the Soto or the Rinzai Zen sect, but the system that I had learned from my sensei and from the Butokukai, but of course my sensei Butokukai gave me all the physical training and academic training pertaining to the martial arts. The system I follow is what they call Shugendo type of training. In the Western world, the only equivalent I can think of, if someone was to only worship the angel Gabriel, the archangels, Gabriel, Michael, or Raphael, not Jesus or Almighty God, something like that. Mm-hmm.
How, given that you studied in the East, mm-hmm. and you've brought the martial arts to the West for a great number of people, how must the martial arts be different from the way it's taught in the East to the way it's taught in the West, given two very different cultures?
Well, in the West, the senseis that came to the West were qualified in the beginning to teach on a physical level, purely on a physical level, and without understanding the mores and folkways of the Western world. They try to push the culture upon the students in America or Europe. And in Europe, they were a little more successful because the European mores and folkways, the European culture is geared to, and the Europe had a feudal system. In other words, it's the structure of Europe society. You have a different class system, caste system, a hierarchical, oligarchical type of structure. So for the Japanese, it was very easy. There was better acceptance. But in Canada and the United States, it was a different problem because Americans are taught democracy, independent thinking, of course, the philosophy of Locke and Rousseau, took heavy hold, influenced the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the Japanese not realizing that, they met some resistance, and what happened is, in the beginning, a lot of Americans who just learned a little bit, I would say maybe Shodan level, went off and started their own styles, taught their own schools, and then you had the so-called Kenpo and the Chinese styles and all that. And fortunately, in America, Mr. Nishiyama came, although in the beginning, they taught completely on a physical level. But he's right now trying to get the people historically oriented, to infuse the history and the culture and thrust and direction of the AAKF, especially not the JK, the AAKF, is in the right direction. Because I've spoken to Mr. Nishiyama a lot, and he realizes that the most important part for the development of karate is to develop the philosophy and to get the real essence of the art. I would say that's a problem. In Japan, you don't have the problem. In Japan, because of the culture, the students, they take, there's an uncritical acceptance of the sensei's teaching. And for the Western man, sometimes he finds it a little frightening because they think the Japanese are trying to develop carbon copies of themselves. It is not that, because they realize that when you face death, there is no time for intellectual functioning. You must face death with the subconscious or the unconscious, depending on terminology, the subliminal perception. And they're not trying to develop stereotypes, they're trying to expand the man, but it's hard for the Western man to understand that.
We only have a few minutes left.
Yes. Yes.
You mentioned that you studied, or that you practiced Tai Chi.
Yes.
A lot of people in karate seem to think that Tai Chi is a real soft style.
Yeah, because a lot of people in karate doesn't know the martial arts. Even Nakayama Sensei, the head of the JK, head instructor, he said himself, in the beginning when he saw the Tai Chi and the Chinese arts, he thought it was weak, meant nothing. But one day, he said himself, if I recollect, and I'm sure I'm right, he saw an old Chinese man blocking a person who attacked him. Seemingly, on the surface, it looked like as if he just had touched the person, and the person's arm was broken in half, and he was amazed, and he was surprised. Then he realized that probably the approach was different, but in the end, the essence was the same. The Tai Chi people believe that you have to develop your internal powers first, your ki first. And if you develop your ki, since your body and your mind and your spirit and whatever is one, it did not matter if you it did not matter. They tell you not to worry trying to develop physical power. Because if a person develops physical power in the beginning, he becomes very powerful. He believes that it is sufficient, but he doesn't realize what if it becomes 70 years of age, or 80 years of age, or 90 years of age, or 100 years of age, if that's possible for some beings. But anyway, let's say you become in your 60s or 70s, and your physical power is gone. What have you got left? And the Tai Chi people believe that you always have spirituality, spiritual power. In fact, it grows as you grow older. And that's the approach. Now, the approach of the people in the so-called hard system, Tai Chi system, they end up the same place. They end up where the Tai Chi people begin. And the Tai Chi people, the so-called internal system, they end up where the karate people begin. So it's just one person going from one end of the spectrum and the other person starting from the other end.
Is there a conflict between studying karate and Tai Chi at the same time?
Well, yeah, I've heard, I've read articles or interviews that Mr. Kanazawa had. He practices Tai Chi too. The JK, in fact, gives dungs in Tai Chi. They give you Shōdang, Yidang, and whatever. They have a man, but enough young, He's a 6th dan in karate, and he teaches Tai Chi. He's supposed to be a descendant of one of the members of the Young family. But Kanazawa believes there's a conflict. There's no conflict. He believes there's a conflict because he doesn't know. He's ignorant of the fact that there's no conflict. A martial art is a martial art. There is no conflict. The method of training on the surface appears to be different. But in the deep structure, it's the same. Like, for example, I give you how people interpret language. We say, Mary bought a car, right? Maybe Erickson told you that. The people who always buys Rolls Royce, a multi-millionaire, he's wondering what kind of Rolls Royce did you pick up, or Mercedes Benz? Because that's his experiential background. Mary bought a car, Mary bought a Rolls Royce. Person who always buys second-hand car, wonder what the hell kind of a second-hand car. Yeah, I'm sorry saying that, you know. What the hell kind of a second-hand car Mary bought, huh? And some people are going to say, I wonder, person who always, when they buy a car, they have to borrow money. I wonder how Mary was able to borrow money. That's a deep structure. With the martial arts, it's turned upside down. You see, it appears to be different on the surface, the so-called soft system of Tai Chi and the hard system, but actually, it's the same in the deep structure. It's the same, just turned upside down. There is no difference. In fact, I would say that people who are very, very skillful in Tai Chi, because it takes many years, if you only practice Tai Chi for 60 years, and you only practice karate for 60 years, with the Tai Chi, and as the way they're teaching now, in general, the Tai Chi man is much more powerful. Much more powerful. The only equivalent to a Tai Chi man for self-defense per se, physical self-defense, would be a very skillful Aiki man. Very skillful Aiki man. But a karate man, if he practices properly, I was telling Mr. Nishiyama today, in karate, in the katas, you have all the jiu-jitsu techniques. You have the so-called kotegaeshi, you know, ikajo, nikajo, sankajo, yonkajo. You have that all in karate. I'm speaking from a position of authority because I am a Daitoryu master. And it all comes in the same place. Like the Indo-European tongues have a common base. The Latin languages have a common base. French, Spanish, and Italian. Latin is the base. When the Latin language broke up, became a dead language. The living language is French, Spanish, and Italian. But the base is the same. So the martial arts, the base is the same. The ultimate base is you become an artist of life. And if you become an artist of life, all the training brought you to that point, and you would not need the training anymore. Now, you cannot come to that point as a, great master if you do not have the training. For example, a person is not born a mathematician or born a piano master. He has the potential, and it is developed by hard training. When you see a person giving a concert, a violin or piano concert, you don't realize the years of training on basics that went into his performance. You only see the conclusion. It's the same thing with the martial arts. The conclusion is you become an artist of life. That's my terminology.
Given that we want to...
I have to go swimming.
Yeah. That we want this film to be for the general public. What do you most want to convey to that audience from your place of spending your life dedicated to the martial arts? What do you most want to convey about yourself, about the martial arts, to that public?
Well, we all have self-interest. Every human being. Not to self-interest, you have to be a saint. So, from my own personal viewpoint, I would like to see that the public school systems in America, as they did in Okinawa, Japan, incorporate the martial arts because it's good for America. Speaking as an American, I was born in America, speaking as an American. Because, let us say if everybody took the martial arts in the United States, don't have to continue forever, but even in the public school system, like when I was in kid going to a school in Hawaii, you know, graduated from high school and put in a couple of years university before I went to the Orient. Physical education, ROTC, was compulsory because the University of Hawaii was a land-grant college. The high school that I went to was, you know, a public high school, and we had to take military training, you know, for example. So everybody who went to a public school in Hawaii had ROTC training. He could not escape, he could not graduate, could not get his diploma, could not get his high school certificate. Now, if everybody took the martial arts in America, and this is my unqualified opinion, and I believe in it very strongly, we would not have the criminality, the crime in America, on the scale we have now. Because if everybody took the martial arts, a person would have to be a psychopath to take the crime. Because a martial arts artist believes in respect, and he values his integrity next to his own life. And if every American did that, you could walk the streets 2 o'clock in the morning in any part of town. That, I think, would be a goal we hope someday to achieve, because it's philosophy. Without philosophy, we are animals. Huh? Okay? Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you know.
Master Richard Kim, where were you born?
Born in Hilo, Hawaii.
In Hawaii?
Yes, Hawaii. I was born in Hilo, then I was 6 years of age, we moved to Honolulu. And I started the martial arts, introduction to the martial arts at the age of 6. Started in judo. My mother owned a hotel, and in an area with business, industrial area, we had a lot of Japanese companies. And that's when we started exposure to judo. Then at the age of 7, a friend to my father, a man by the name of Arakaki, he said there's a big master from Okinawa that does karate and they're better than judo people. But judo sensei didn't think they were better. You know, the Japanese were very See, the Japanese history, those who were born in the mainland in Japan, they consider themselves the inner people. They call themselves the inner people. And they, socially, they discriminate against people, what they call the outer people, like people who's the part of Japanese islands, like Okinawa, for example. So any art that was not associated with the Japanese, they considered foreign. So the judo teacher didn't think he was master. He was Yabu Kenso. He was one of the greatest karate masters ever lived. And he came demonstrating, he taught for about a year and a half, something like that. And
in Honolulu?
In Hawaii. And I was allowed to attend his classes. And my first exposure to karate. I didn't like it too much in the beginning. The judo was more fun. But it helped out a lot because Hawaii is called the melting pot of the Pacific. And you have many different races. And when you go to school, like the area I was living in is a Japanese district, and you got to pass the Portuguese district. And the Chinese, there's no trouble. The Chinese, philosophically, they don't physically fight as a race, you know, historically also. But when you're kids, you know, like if you have that in the States, the different ethnic neighborhoods, you have to fight all the way till you get to school. So the first year of exposure to karate and practicing judo helped me a lot. You know, school I had to fight all the time.
So you were about 8 years old?
Can I interrupt you? Walter, could you move your chair in over here so that it's more of a line towards the camera than
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was born November 17, 1919. And that makes me November this coming year I'll be 61, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was that old.
You don't look that old.
But yes, the exposure to karate was about.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Can you turn it up again? There you go. Sorry, I was just checking for the files again.
Okay, can I continue?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Your exposure to karate was 1926. That's the first year of this, present-day emperor, his reign. I was seven years of age. But I started judo at the age of 6. My forte, all the way until I went to Japan in when did I go to Japan? 1936, 38. 1938, I went to Japan. Judo was my first love all the time. And I was tall for my age, in the same size. I was, how small the Orientals are, basically. And I was really tall also. I did real well in judo. And karate, I practiced karate, then after I practiced arakaki. And my father's friend, he knew karate, most Okinawans knew karate. And it was more to help me in a street fight as a kid. But when I went to Japan, and I was introduced to Yoshida Kotaro, in fact, Oyama, in one of his books, considered him the greatest samurai in the last 100 years. He introduced me to the Butokukai, and I entered the martial arts college, trained at the Butokukai. Then the philosophy of the Japanese martial arts took hold. Prior to that, in Hawaii, as far as I was concerned, it was like most people, you just train judo, karate. There's no philosophy involved because the cultural background was different. Then I realized that the philosophy of the martial art as we know it, even in karate, is basically Japanese philosophy. See, what happened is karate, as you know today, got infused with the exoteric part, the physical part, all the katas and all that. The Chinese, the fountainhead, that came to Okinawa and came to Japan. But there was no philosophy per se involved. You can see the Chinese styles, there's no philosophy, although they think they have. The samurai philosophy was infused into karate from the Japanese. So Japanese karate is unique. It has its roots in Okinawa, but it is entirely different because the philosophical concept of the samurai spirit crept in. And I would say the big explosion for karate actually happened in Japan, as I know it, because I learned from the pure Okinawan style. When I first learned karate, at that time I was told, although in my case it was a seisan, which we call hangetsu in Japan, was the first kata. Either that or patsai, which Japanese call basai dai, was the first kata. And then, of course, the history of karate when it was introduced into the public school system in Okinawa around 1906. The heian, or the pingan, the heian is the Japanese pronunciation of pingan, all the Japanese pronunciation, more Okinawan pronunciation, was created by Itosu Sensei to make it for an educational purpose, as an introduction, these introductory forms. But the real karate schools started right off, patsai or seishan, depending upon the type you're learning. And we branched into, and usually you only learn about 5 katas, and then the philosophy crept in, like how Sensei Nishiyama is trying to incorporate later on, synchronize, in karate and all that. They did that in old days. Like we would do a seisan form, and you become quite proficient. And you would do it backwards, and I'll do it forward, and I'd be attacking you, and you'd be blocking, you'd be doing it backwards. And that was the kumite all rolled in one. And that's how it developed.
And that was the nature of your early training in the Butokukai.
Yes.
Can you say something about the history of the Butokukai?
The Butokukai. The history of the Butokukai?
Yeah, and then how you fit. Yeah.
The Butokukai, historically, the concept was first organized. We say that, but the concept of the Butokukai was around 870 AD by the 50th emperor of Japan, Kanmu, K-N-M-U. On Boys' Day, he promulgated Boys' Day, May 5th. On Boys' Day, they have all martial arts festivals. And Japan is a patriarchal society. And they train in what they call the Butoku training hall, called the Butoku Den, the concept was start from Listopada Butoku then, and trying to instill the martial arts spirit, in all the young children in Japan. And in 1895, under the auspices of Baron Oura, O-U-R-A, and Prince Fushimi, Fushimi, it incorporated. It was incorporated in the Japanese government as an educational system. Then in 1905, of course, there was a big meeting among all the Jiu-Jitsu and Kano Sensei, and they all joined the Butokukai. But the Butokukai traditionally is an organization to teach the Japanese martial arts, primarily Kendo and archery. And then, of course, Jiu-Jitsu, all the different types of Jiu-Jitsu. Then Judo was recognized after 1905. Karate was recognized as a Japanese martial arts during World War II, as a Japanese martial arts. But 1932, Butokukai had karate, but it was not officially recognized as a Japanese martial arts, like recognizing an Olympic, to give you a description, like the Olympics have not yet recognized baseball as an Olympic art, so we're trying to get karate. Judo was recognized as an Olympic art way after World War II. So, when you learn in the Butokukai, you had your specialty, but you were exposed and you were required to learn the traditional, especially Kendo, the Japanese weapons. The idea was to develop virtue. And of course, I have the pin here. And Butoku means martial virtue or military virtue on a straight translation, developing virtue. The whole purpose of the martial arts philosophically, which has escaped the attention of the Western world actually, is to develop what they call an artist of life. An artist of life. And I'll digress a little bit. What an artist of life is. Well, everybody knows what an artist is. As an artist, he has the media he works in, and he has the tools he works with. Like if a painter, he has his brush and his oils or watercolor, whatever he paints in his canvas. And a sculptor has his chisel, knife, hammer, and what if he sculpts in marble or whatever. The artist of life, he has his tools, his physical body. It's a holistic program, actually. He develops his physical body, his tools. You got to be proud of your tool. Like a doctor, he has his tools, right? So that's his tool. And what is the medium he works in is the universe. So the artist of life, the whole universe is his medium. Where he works in, that's his canvas. And he works with his tool, and he combines it. So with the artist of life, there is no separation of mind and body as in the West. Of course, the separation in the West actually came from medicine because of René Descartes. Descartes made the complete separation. And the artist of life, he stands there. He has fashioned out his life the way he wants it. He epitomizes. I am the master of my fate, the captain of my soul. That's what an artist. That's the real ultimate aim of martial artists. And before you can become an artist of life, there is one big obstacle. The knowledge of self. The knowledge of self. To know yourself. In fact, it has all been a question since the days of the Greeks. You heard of Diogenes, right? Diogenes, and the man who was always living in a barrel looking for an honest man, never found an honest man. They asked him, what was the most difficult thing for a human being? He was an artist of life, He said, to know thyself. Well, in contrast, what is the easiest accomplishment for human beings? Is to give advice to different people. To know yourself. And that's the thing that the artist of life must conquer. He must be able to know yourself. You have to reach a stage where Zen people call Satori, or martial artists called Kensho. If you don't reach that stage, it's always impossible to become an artist of life because you are bound. You're bound by illusion. You're bound by all the filtering system that creates the world for you, the language you speak, your cultural background, your value system, the type of job you have. An artist of life, he rises beyond that. And that's the ultimate aim of the martial artist. Unfortunately, I'm not talking of Japan having lost the war, but at that period, a lot of the martial arts spirit left the martial arts scene, and the martial arts has become a sport. And there is too much of emphasis on winning, and then in sports, the emphasis should be on winning, because you enter a sporting event, you want to win, otherwise no use entering a sporting event. And that would have a tendency to negate the martial arts philosophy. So to find a compromise for the modern martial artist is a very difficult thing.
So you first became aware of the use of the martial arts for personal development, spiritual development in the Budokukai.
No, it brought it into sharp focus, because I was not exposed to weapons until I went to Japan. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, my parents, my father suffered a lot. My father was half Japanese. He was half Japanese, and he was raised in Nagasaki, and being half Japanese and half Korean. At that time, in my father's era, it was all right, because he left Japan. He died during World War II. I was in Japan. I didn't see him die. The last time I saw my father was in 1936. At that time, there was no social opprobrium against the Koreans and by the Japanese, but he was a half-breed. And in any country, even in America, with all the liberalism we have in America, many societies we go inside, even in America, if you're half white or half something else, black or something like that, it's hard to be accepted. Although on paper, they are. That holds true for any country in the world, especially a country that is homogeneous in population. A heterogeneous population, you haven't got the trouble too much, because you can move into the big cities. But Japan is a very homogeneous race, and anybody who's not pure Japanese, eventually there is slight, opprobrium, discrimination, and the kids are white, and naturally he's going to marry somebody of the same racial background. And my mother, Japanese, and, they, in a way, encourage and also forced me to take the martial arts.
Forced you?
Well, when you're kids, you like to go outside and play, training, at certain periods of time. So they encourage and force at periods when I didn't want to train. They said it's for spiritual development. So if they gave me any gift, that was it for me, because I survived during World War II in wartime Japan. During the World War II, I was in Japan, parts of China, as an American citizen. And it was my martial arts background and everything that stood me in very good stead. If you become an artist of life, or if you, irrespective of the discipline or your profession, if you know the martial art, because it pertains only on the physical basis, let's talk of the physical basis itself. If only on the physical basis, which most martial arts dojos teach, because they're not equipped to teach it beyond that, because that's the only exposure they have had. They have not had the academic background in the martial arts. They have not attended regular lectures and sessions and studied as an academician would, besides doing the physical component of the art. We know that, because it's a new thing in America. Even on a physical basis, if you have a good martial arts training, it may provide you a good living. You take, for example, Richard Lee. He's only a high school graduate, but he makes a very good living in a highly structured society in France, because it's something they want.
Richard Lee is one of your students, right? Master, yes.
Because he can teach the martial arts. Because irrespective of what man says, he fights all the time. Man has not stopped fighting. In any area of the world, you look at the map, from the days of Jesus till now, we have not stopped fighting. In fact, they're now discovering, because what they call an artifact in the brain, we're no different from a cannibal lizard. We must fight. And the final arbiter for man, even on the international scene, the final judge, the great judge, is not Almighty God. It's war. You fight, and you win, you are right, and you lose, you are wrong. You end up settling. Life in modern day society is an adversary system. We go to court, it's an adversary system. The capitalist system, even the socialist system, it's an adversary system. You always have an adversary. And to adjudicate the adversary system, you have codification, you have laws. And of course, the final arbiter between two countries is war. So, until man can live in heaven, and even in heaven, you had an adversary system. You had the greatest one of all, you had Lucifer and the Almighty God. So, it's always a battle raging all the time, even in heaven.
So how does...
Excuse me. I'm sorry, but I have to around that. Okay.
Yeah. Coming back to when I was young, in Hawaii, we went to, of course, it was territory at that time. Hawaii achieved statehood after World War II. We all had to attend a public school system. This is English school. Then, after school, when the school was let out, we went to Oriental schools. I attended both Korean and Japanese schools, so I was studying all day long. Then at night, after dinner, I'd go downstairs and train judo. Many times, to be forced to train was like this. This is in an Oriental household, especially the type of household I was raised in, probably. Not the Chinese, I've had the Chinese, but I know the Japanese. When you come home and you had a fight, right, and your nose is bleeding or something like that, your parents ask you, what did you do? Well, in our house anyway, Korean, who won the fight? If you lost, you didn't eat. Father was very strict. It's a disgrace to lose the fight, But if a big group of people jump on you, that's different, but 1-to-1. That is the reason why, for example, I still remember one person by the name of Koji Ariyoshi. He was my arch rival. I missed 7 dinners on account of him. He beat me up 7 times. And then my parents would say, well, you didn't train hard enough. And then I had to stay longer. We talked to the sensei. I had to stay longer in the school. And then some Saturdays you have the football games and you want to go, and that's the training time, and very strict. You have that to a certain extent, even in the dojos, even in Minneapolis, all over. The sensei wants you to be there in the dojo at a certain time, and maybe you have to study, and you have to try to compromise how you want to get out of the training, which one was more important on the value system. But as far as my parents was concerned, the training was more important.
How long would you train for? How long would a training session be?
All my life, as far back as I can remember, even as a child, I would say that I averaged 2 hours a day. Average. Right now, of course, I train 2 hours in the morning. On a trip like this, I just do my own training in the room. I get up 5:30 in the morning, every morning, irrespective of what time I go to bed. And I stretch, and I do Tai Chi, because in the room, you got to soften. I train about 2 hours. But on a regular basis, when I'm home, I train 2 hours in the morning, 6 to 8, because I'm not working now. And I write. Then I train for maybe between 10 and 12. Then in the afternoon, I would research. I'd get a student or my wife, and like I'm teaching a lot of the short stick fighting. The only similarity to that in America is the Filipino style of stick fighting, the eskrima they have, the armies. And then I'm trying to research something on a physical basis and on movements. And sometimes I do this with my wife because she's very proficient, or with somebody. Then at night, I do a lot of writing. And I train, sometimes not physically, but I train through a process. The only way for the Western world to understand is a process of self-hypnosis. You have taken hypnosis, Walter, so you know what self-hypnosis is. So I put myself in a light trance, and I go review my deficiencies in the katas or my students' deficiencies, I project through self-hypnosis. So I train, I program myself. So I'm training all the time. All the time.
When did you receive your Shodan, your first degree black belt?
In judo, I'm glad you asked me that. From the 20s, I took judo. I never received my Shodan until 1940, and then from Shodan to fourth dan, I went very fast in judo, because judo you can achieve the dan by winning competition. That is in judo. I did not receive my Shodan in karate until 1943, and then I was a Shodan for a long time. Till the war ended, I was still Shodan karate because they did not give ranks. Then when the war ended, MacArthur closed the Butokukai. To close the Butokukai, Yoshida was the Prime Minister of Japan. This is a very interesting part of Japanese history. Only academicians would know. They have to do historical research. Yoshida told the Prime Minister, he said, if you close the Butokukai, you will destroy the Liberal Democratic Party. The Liberal Democratic Party was created by the United States and was very favorable to the United States. But they're still in power, Liberal Democratic Party. And MacArthur said, well, he is convinced from whatever knowledge that he has received, information that Butokukai was responsible for World War II. That was his rationale. Of course it was not. But the factors that led to World War II are too complex for any small organization to start the war. And Yoshida said, well, if you close it, believe me, the Liberal Democratic Party will be destroyed and the Socialist Party, the Communist Party may move in. So MacArthur said, is there any way, any alternative way that I can save the Butokukai? Yoshida said, yes, sir. You release some war criminals that are in Sugamo prison. And MacArthur had 3 war criminals released to appease, the powers that be, and he was able to close the Butokukai. Then the Butokukai was reactivated.
Well, what happened during this period? How did people train? Oh,
yes, in Japan. Then, because a lot of Americans had trained judo in America, the judo people convinced him, the Kodokan, convinced him that